Welcome back to the fifth presentation of childhood obesity prevention and treatment. Today we're going to be talking about the what of feeding. So we've already done a lot of talking about the when and the where of feeding. So today we're really going to focus on the what. My name is Melissa Moses. I am a registered dietitian with the Brenner Fit program, a part of Wake Forest Baptist Health, and I've been with the program for over 5 years now, working using this DOR model that you guys have been learning about. As far as disclosures, I have none, and none of the presenters, planning committee members, faculty, and staff have anything relevant to disclose either. So learning objectives for today's presentation, we are going to again review the DOR model. Then we're going to learn a little bit about the balanced plate as far as balanced meals and snacks. So you may already know the balanced plate, but we talk about it in a little bit different way than how it's presented on the My Plate. We're also going to touch on beverages, so low sugar beverages versus high sugar beverages, and what to look for. And then we're going to lastly explore how to put these concepts into practice that you've learned. So again, at the end, we'll talk about teaching tools that you can use with your families and patients in your clinic. Let's review the DOR. Who remembers what the parent's role is versus the child's role? I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds to discuss. The parent's job is the what, the when, and the where. When the parent does these 3 jobs, they set their children up to be able to do their jobs on deciding how much they will eat or whether they will eat at all. Previously, we discussed in the when and where of feeding your child. Today, we will discuss the what of feeding. We choose to do the when and where first because they are the most important parts of the parent's role. The what is the next step when the parent feels confident about the when and the where. How do you know when parents are ready for the what? That's a great question. So really, when meals and snacks are on a schedule, that's an important indicator that they're ready for the what. Because if there's no schedule at all, and they're struggling with it, it doesn't matter what the family's eating. They could be eating all day long and be eating healthy foods all day long, but if they don't have a schedule down, none of what they're doing is going to work well. Also, meals and snacks should be eaten at the table without distractions. And this is really important because what we know is that when meals and snacks are ate without distractions, children and adults are really able to be more in tune with what their body is telling them. I always like to think, if you've ever sat in front of a TV with a whole bag of potato chips and all of a sudden the bag is gone because you haven't been paying attention, you do a lot of mindless eating when you are distracted. So that's why it's so important to sit down and have no distractions happening whenever you're eating. Also, the parent should be working towards trusting the child with their role of eating. That's important. The parent needs to have trust that the child is able to determine whenever they're hungry or whenever they're full. The idea is that it's not just let the child eat however much they want whenever they want it. They still have to eat on a schedule, but the parent trusts them to eat the amount they need at those scheduled times, and that's key to making all of this work. The child's really got to learn to be more in tune with their body and understand better when it's telling them that they're hungry or when they need to eat a little bit more. This may sound a little weird, but I would like for everybody to draw what they had for dinner last night. So if you have a pen or a pencil, please draw in your booklet on this PowerPoint slide a picture of what you ate for dinner last night. And this is a great tool that we use for our families too, just to get a better idea of what typical meals look like for them. So I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes and then I'll come back. Okay, so we've had 2 minutes to draw what we had for dinner last night. I would just like everybody just sort of think how that made them feel when you had to draw what you had for dinner last night. Some of you may have been like, oh, this is a piece of cake. Others may have been like, I don't want to share that information about what I had. And it's important to notice that and think about that, whenever we ask our patients to share information about their food. Food is very personal to people. So that's why it's so important to be sensitive to that whenever you are talking with food about patients, or with patients about food. Excuse me. One of the reasons that I had you guys draw your dinner from last night is because I want to talk a little bit about the balanced plate. So you may have seen a version of this before, and that's called My Plate, and that took over the food pyramid. And what I really love about our Brenner Fit version of the balanced plate is what it's really showing is just adding variety to your meals. It's different than the My Plate because it's not suggesting, certain serving sizes of different foods, because like you already know, we really want to focus on making sure that the meal is satisfying to somebody. So we're not setting limits to how much protein or grains or fruits or vegetables somebody can have at a meal. The idea is that the family offers these different food groups at the meal, and they're part of the balanced plate, but not everybody has to choose every part. The idea is that you're offering really more so, instead of a balanced plate, a balanced table. So that's a good way to think of it, is that it's a balanced table. And so again, that's just getting all those different components, all those different food groups at the meal, because what we know is when you have all those food groups at the meal is more satisfying. It, fills you up faster, keeps you fuller longer. So let's discuss discuss a little bit more about the different parts of the balance plate. You may already know what different proteins are, but we're going to review what those are because the balance plate is such a great teaching tool for families, and we have a great handout that I'll show you at the end of the PowerPoint presentation as far as teaching tools that lets families know what food groups fall into which part of the plate, because they don't always understand what's a protein or what's a grain, even what's a fruit or a vegetable. You just don't know. All families are so different in their knowledge on nutrition, so you just can't assume that they know stuff. So for your protein, we've got your meat, which consists of beef and pork and poultry and venison, and there's probably others out there that aren't all listed on here. And then you've got your seafoods, you have your nuts and your nut butters, your beans and your lentils, your dairy, and then your meat alternatives. And what you may notice about the beans and lentils is that there's a star at the end. So the reason why there's a star is because they can be considered a protein or a grain, depending on if another protein is offered at the meal. So if you had chicken at your meal, your beans would actually fall into your grains / starch part of your plate. And then next we have our grains and our starches. So you'll notice that tortillas, bread, cereal, different types of pasta and rice all fall under this section, and those would be considered the grains. The starches are your starchy vegetables, and this is really a teaching point for a lot of families. They don't realize that potatoes and peas and corn, those are all considered starchy vegetables. So we put them in the same section as the grains and starch on our plate. And then you'll notice that you have the beans and the lentils, which again can either be a protein or a starch / grain, and it gives you examples of what those would be on the plate. A lot of times families might have 2 starches or 2 grains at their meal. You know, maybe they have chicken, then they have macaroni and cheese and potatoes, and that's their meal. And it's important as a provider to be considerate as to what, you know, they typically eat for a meal. That might be the normal thing that they have for a meal. So to have to take away one of those items can really be hard for a family. So in Benefit, instead of taking stuff away, a lot of times we think about, well, how about adding something to that meal? And what would that look like? What would they want to add? And then they might say, oh, you know, maybe we'll add some broccoli to the meal, or maybe we'll add some fruit to the meal, you know, some grapes, something to just add a little bit more variety. And that's a way to kind of slowly get families to having all the different food groups on their plate. And then at some point they might get tired of having, you know, the macaroni and cheese and the potatoes, and they might say, hey, well, let's take one of them off. But it's really got to be up to the family to decide, you know, when that's right for them. Lastly, we have the fruits and vegetables. And you'll notice on this slide that it sort of makes up half the plate. It doesn't have to be exactly half the plate. The way this is, it's just a representation just to show that the meal can contain fruits and or vegetables. So that means that, you know, half of it could be fruit, half of it could be vegetables, or a mixture of both. And again, it's all about having a balanced table. So if a child does not choose to eat fruits and vegetables at their meal, that's a-okay. The idea is that it's offered. And it's important to know that for fruit, fresh, frozen, canned, and dried are all great options. You know, if they're worried about the sugar content, there's things that you can do as far as, you know, canned fruit, choosing 100% juice that the fruit comes in. Frozen fruit, typically, you know, no extra sugar is added. And for dried fruit, sometimes you can get it with lower sugar options. And then for vegetables, these would be your non-starchy vegetables. So anything other than your potatoes, your corn, and your peas. So we're talking about carrots and broccoli and onions and peppers and salad. All of those types of things would be considered non-starchy. And again, fresh, frozen, canned, all of those are great options. I know some people say, don't buy canned vegetables, they're not good for you. But again, you have to think about where the family is. If they're on a budget, canned might be, the simplest option for them, and that's a-okay. You can buy canned items that have lower salt in them if that's something that families are worried about. If you rinse your canned vegetables, it takes almost 50% of the sodium out of it, and you just add your own water back. Something important to know about frozen vegetables is a lot of times they are fresher than the fresh vegetables that you get at the store. And the reason why is because they are picked, at the perfect ripeness, and they're frozen right after they're picked. So all their vitamins and minerals and nutrients are really preserved whenever they're frozen. Rather, when they're fresh, they could take weeks or so to get to your grocery store. Who knows? And the longer they sit on the shelf, the more vitamins and minerals they lose over time. Again, all of those different versions are great options for families. They do not have to be fresh fruits and vegetables. It's important to share with families, that it's okay to buy frozen or canned items. Sometimes they might not taste as well, but it's a-okay to buy those items. If they're going to buy fresh produce, buy what's in season and buy what's on sale. They don't have to spend tons of money on fresh fruits and vegetables. Why is the balanced plate important? So, number one, instead of having to worry about counting calories and limiting portions, using the balanced plate adds variety to your meals. So a lot of our families and a lot of society focuses on counting calories and limiting portions. And what we know about that is the more that you focus on doing those things, the more you want to eat. It happens over and over again. It's just like dieting. You get on a diet, you do really well, you get off the diet, you gain the weight back, and you gain even more weight back. And that's because you've restricted yourself so much. But the balanced plate doesn't do that. It's all about just adding variety to your meals. And when you have all those different food groups at your meal, the meal is more satisfying to you. It fills you up faster and keeps you fuller longer. By offering the balanced plate, parents provide the nutrition children need. So children are able to get all the macronutrients they need. Carbohydrates, protein, fat, all in their diet. All of those things help satisfy the children throughout the day. Gives you your vitamins and minerals that you need by offering that variety at the meals. Offering all the food groups at meals helps the children fill up and stay satisfied until the next time to eat. And trusting their child to decide how much they're going to eat at the meal really helps them start to be more in tune with what their body is telling them. So by doing this, it helps reduce grazing between meal and snack times. It reduces the amount of times that the kid is asking to eat when it's not time to eat. And children, don't worry. Don't worry if the children, doesn't eat all the parts of the meal, because what we know, pressuring only backfires. It creates a struggle around meals. Parents should do their job with providing, and the child should do their job with deciding. And that's what we know really works long term. Right now, you're seeing the satiety curve. And this was created by Ellen Satter, and you can find it in her Secrets of Feeding a Healthy Family book. And what you'll notice is that there's 4 different parts that we're going to talk about. So satisfaction from consuming sugar, starch, protein, and fat. So we'll start with sugar first. And what you'll notice about the sugar curve is that it spikes really fast and then it goes down really quickly. So it's going to give you that quick satisfaction, but it's not going to really last as far as, keeping you full. So what you need to know about sugar is that sugar needs little digestion. It gives a quick spike of energy, but has little staying power, so it leaves you hungry soon after, and then perhaps even hungrier than when you started. So this could be something like juice or soda that might give you this pattern, or even, something like fruit snacks. So when our bodies are in a starved state, they tend to seek a quick fix, often in the form of sugar. But, you have that quick fix and then you're hungry again and soon after. The next curve you see is the starch curve. So this is all about complex carbohydrates. So whole veggies and fruits, whole grains and beans, those types of things are going to be more of our complex carbohydrates. So starch is broken down and readily absorbed. So the nutrients get to you soon after you start eating and stay around longer than sugar. So they help maintain a more consistent blood sugar level, which causes greater satisfaction and energy. Next, you'll see our protein. So protein is more slowly digested and absorbed than carbohydrates. Therefore, you feel fuller longer. So you'll notice that it takes a little bit longer, for satisfaction to happen whenever you eat just protein. But you'll notice that it keeps you fuller longer. Protein options, just like we talked about before, would be meat, nuts, seeds, beans, dairy, fish, all those types of things. And then lastly on the curve, you'll see fat. And what you may notice about fat is it's the last one to spike. So if you had fat at a meal, it would take a while for it to satisfy your hunger, but it has a longer staying power, a longer satisfaction. So including fat in your meals and snacks tends to keep you satisfied longer. So think about this. Eating all low-fat and fat-free foods tends to be less satisfying and have less staying power. Fat stays in your stomach longer and moves slowly into your intestines. Fat digests and absorbs into your bloodstream most slowly of all, and therefore is most sustaining. So it also contributes to a pleasant texture to foods, which can make them more enjoyable. So your fats would be your different oils and butters and nuts and seeds and those types of things that add fat into your diet. So what you'll notice about this is it's kind of an interpretation of the balanced plate in a way. If you're having all those different parts of your meal, so you've got a little bit of sugar in there, some starch, protein, and fat, that is a meal that's really going to stay with you. It's going to satisfy your taste pretty quickly, and it's going to keep you full for a long amount of time. And that's really what we're looking for whenever we talk about the balanced plate and adding variety into our meals. Having all those different parts of the meal is important. So, consider what happens when you have a low or no carbohydrate diet. So dropping out the sugar and starch curves means you have to wait before you feel satisfied from a high protein, high fat meal. So think about it. If you take out all the sugar and carbohydrates it's going to take you a little bit to feel satisfied at that meal. So you might overeat potentially because it's not satisfying you very quickly. So again, another reason why to have all those different parts in your meal. Love that interpretation. Let's go back to our plate that everyone drew earlier. So if we can just take a minute just to talk about what you noticed about your meal, and talk about changes that you might make to the meal. Maybe go around the room if you would like, and some people can share maybe what they had for dinner last night and what they might change about it, what they may add to it. So let's spend the next 2 minutes doing that. Okay, so again, you've had time to discuss and talk about it, and just think about what that was like to have to share your food. So just like we talked about earlier, how food is a very sensitive subject for people. So to have to share their food can sometimes be very hard. And some of you may have been very willing to share, and others had no interest at all in sharing. So with families, I always like to sort of think through their meals. So you may have had a perfectly balanced plate, and that is wonderful. There may be others out there that felt like they could make some changes to their meal. Uh, for families who are wondering what to do as far as how to make their meals more filling, thinking about adding all those food groups to a meal can help make the meal more filling. So just as I talked about earlier, let's say they had chicken with potatoes and corn at the meal. So you've got a protein and then 2 starches at the meal. And so at first, we wouldn't even talk about taking away one of those starch items. We would just talk about adding to their plates if they wanted to add, more variety and wanted to change something about it. So letting them decide what would be the thing that they would add. After you've talked a little bit with them and shown them the balanced plate. And maybe it's they want to add, carrots to the meal, or maybe they want to add strawberries to the meal. It doesn't even have to be a completely balanced meal. That's a-okay that it's not completely balanced at first. You know, it's all about making small baby steps. And so that's how you would do it with a family. That's how you would talk it through and figure out what type of changes they would want to make to it. Because what we know is that if they're in charge of making those changes and they have the ideas themselves, they're more likely to make those changes. What we're going to get into next is we're going to talk a little bit about breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks, and then we're going to go into beverages. For the what for breakfast, what we talk about is aiming for at least 3 food groups at breakfast time. So sometimes it's hard to get vegetables in for breakfast. So typically it's going to be a fruit, a grain, and a protein. And just like with meals, everybody usually does a very good job with breakfast at getting in some form of protein and grain. So an example of that would be cereal with milk. You know, you've got your cereal, which is a grain, and your milk, which is your protein. So if we're talking about ways to make the breakfast more filling because you have a child who's getting really hungry in the morning, you know, at school time, a way to talk through that is, you know, to talk about what they can add to their breakfast to make it more filling. So, you know, maybe they add a fruit to the meal, or a lot of times you might have a kid that's not even eating breakfast. And so in reality, we can't expect them to get what we call a balanced breakfast of 3 food groups if they're not eating anything at all. So maybe at first it's just eating something for breakfast. It doesn't matter what it is, just something. Maybe it's even drinking a glass of milk, and that's just fine to do. It's all about making those baby steps and moving towards eating a more balanced breakfast so that it's filling for them in the day. So the reason why we talk about eating a balanced breakfast is because it helps you eat the right amount throughout the day. When we skip meals, what we tend to do is we crave things that's more calories, higher in fat and sugar throughout the day, and then we tend to overeat throughout the day when we skip meals. So breakfast really is an important part of the day. And just like I said before, it doesn't have to be balanced at first. Maybe it's just eating something for breakfast. So it, like I said, it's decreasing grazing, and then it's making balanced, it helps them make balanced choices throughout the day. These are examples of balanced breakfast options. So the top one on the left with the strawberries is what we call a breakfast banana split. This is our take on a banana split with ice cream. So instead of the ice cream, you've got yogurt instead. And what we've done is we've added some fruit to it. We've added some granola and some yogurt for the protein. And we've made it a little bit fun by adding a few sprinkles to it. So your yogurt or your nuts that you have on it are going to be protein, then you've got fruit, and then your granola is going to be your grain. So there's your 3 food groups. Then you've got your muffins with your fruit parfait. So your muffin is going to be your grain, and then you've got all those different types of fruit in your parfait, and then you've got your yogurt, which is going to be your protein. So there's your 3 food groups. Lastly, on the bottom, you've got cereal with milk. So your typical breakfast, and what we've done is we've added a fruit to it to make it more balanced. You can easily switch the fruit out for whatever type of fruit that you want at breakfast time. So what for lunch? A balanced lunch is aiming for 3 to 4 food groups at the meal. So it can be packed lunch or it can be school lunch. Both can be balanced. And we're going to talk a little bit more about packed versus school lunch in just a minute. The parent's role with lunch, if they're packing it, is to offer a balanced packed lunch. The kid can decide what parts of the lunch that they want to eat, and that's a-okay. It's important to make sure that the parent trusts the child to eat what parts of the lunch they want to eat. Here's our example of the school lunch versus packed lunch, and this is really interesting. So let's just take a minute here to discuss together what you're noticing about these two lunch options. All right, so we've had time to think about the two different options. So I'll tell you what I noticed first. What I notice is that a lot of people think that school lunches are terrible, that they're not healthy, and that packing lunch is the way to go. But what you may notice about the right side for the packed lunch is you've got a lot of protein and grains for the meal, and not a lot of fruits or vegetables. And what we see in our clinic is that's kind of typical. And people think that fruit snacks are considered a vegetable when in reality it's just a sugar. And you've got your Gatorade, which is also a sugar beverage. And then on the left side with the school lunch, you may notice that you've got all 4 food groups at that meal. And that's kind of typical of school lunch. Now kids still might get to decide what parts they want to eat of the school lunch, but a balanced lunch is offered at school. And for our families, who are not as well off, we can't expect them to pack a lunch every day for their child. So we bless the lunch food, and it is a-okay to eat the school lunch food that is offered. A lot of times what I even notice too is it's the only time that kids are getting any fruit and vegetables throughout the day, which is kind of crazy. But it's really what I see quite often. So for the school lunch on the left, the grain for the meal is going to be your wrap. The protein is going to be your chicken and your milk. Then the fruit is going to be your apple. The vegetable is going to be your carrots or your veggies in your wrap. So that's 4 food groups right there. And then on your packed lunch, this is going to be your grain, is going to be the bread and the chips. Then you've got protein, which is your deli meat, vegetables, none, and then fruit snacks, which are really not a food group at all. They're just pretty much made up of sugar. So you've got 2 food groups there. So very common what you're seeing here as far as school lunch versus the packed lunch. Let's think about this. What are snacks? When you hear the word snacks, what comes to mind? Let's just talk about that for 30 seconds. So discuss in your group, and I'll come back and we'll talk about it. we did a Google search, and these are the types of things that you see when you search for snacks on Google. So you'll notice what you see are things in a vending machine, chips, candy, soda, all the yummy snack foods that there are. And most Americans think of snacks as foods you should not eat. But really, snacks are very important to have during the day. We want to think about snacks differently and see them as an important piece to fueling our bodies and our children's bodies. So we're going to discuss what that would look like. And snacks really get a bad rap. You just think of snacks as junk food, and snacking means eating whenever you want to eat. But with what we're talking about is snacks are really more intentional. So you're having one snack in between a meal. It's scheduled. It's at a certain time during the day. And the way to make the snack more filling is to make it what we call a mini meal. So a mini meal includes 2 food groups. I always think if you had an apple to eat, and just like I talked about earlier with the apple, you get hungry 30 minutes to an hour later after you've eaten your apple. But if you pair something else with the apple, like an apple with peanut butter, that's going to fuel your body and nourish it. It's going to help you stay more satisfied, provide more energy, and help control your hunger until it's the next time to eat. Here's some examples of what mini meals would look like. On the top left, you've got some yogurt with, looks like some cereal in it, but it could very well be some granola. So you've got a protein with your granola and a grain with your cereal or your granola. And then on the bottom, you've got chips with salsa. So you've got chips, which are your grain. You've got your salsa, which is your vegetable. And then on the top right, you've got an apple with string cheese. So you've got your cheese is your protein and your apple is your fruit. Now, having a protein at snack time is going to help make that snack last even longer. So if you're really looking for the snack to stay with you for a long time, adding a protein with it may make it more filling, just as we talked about before in that satiety curve. These are some other examples of mini meals. So kids have snacks that they enjoy to eat. And Brenner Fit loves all food. Okay? We're never going to tell a kid that they can never eat their potato chips or their Cheez-Its or whatever else it is that's their favorite thing to have. And a lot of kids do have chips for a snack, and we can't expect them to just cut that out. So we talk about, well, if we had chips, what would be something else that you would add to it to make it more filling? So it could be chips with an apple. Or on the left side, you see the pudding. So it's the pudding with graham crackers crushed up in it. So there's your 2 food groups. You've got protein and you've got grains. And then on the bottom, if you're going to have cookies for a snack, have something else with it. So cookies with milk. That would be 2 food groups right there. Now obviously, we wouldn't want to have cookies and milk for every snack, but it's important to still have those what we call forbidden foods sometimes, because if we never allow our children to enjoy those types of foods, they're always going to be looking for those foods. So allowing them to sometimes have as many Oreos as they want at snack time and fill up off of them is really important. Just to show that foods are not forbidden and it's okay to have them, because anytime something is forbidden, it just makes you want it more. And what we find for kids is they tend to end up searching for it in other ways, and that's in the form of sneaking and hiding food. And we don't want that to happen. We want them to feel trusted with their eating. Sugar beverages. So for sugar beverages, it's important to sort of know the facts behind sugar beverages. What we know about sugar beverages is that it provides added sugar that the body really does not need. It can lead to excess weight gain and increased triglycerides. All sugar is the same, no matter what kind of sugar it is, no matter if it's white sugar, agave nectar, honey, brown sugar, fruit juice, high fructose corn syrup. They all react in our body the same and provide, added sugar that our body doesn't really need. And they don't satisfy our hunger. So just as we talked about earlier in that satiety curve, you notice that sugar was the first thing that spiked really fast, but then also dropped really fast and didn't keep you satisfied as far as hunger goes. And some sugar beverages do contain vitamins and minerals, but they have little amount of fiber. And so what that would be your fruit juices. So fruit juices are a good source of vitamins and minerals. But what we know about fruit juices is they really don't provide satiety. They just provide added sugar. And it's always better to eat your fruit than drink it. It takes almost 7 oranges squeezed to make 1 cup of orange juice. That's a lot. We would never eat that many oranges at one sitting, or at least most likely never eat that many at one sitting. So it's always better to eat your fruit versus drinking your fruit. And again, all sugar is the same. So even though it's considered natural sugar that's coming from the fruit juice, it's still sugar. So it's still reacting in your body the same way. Drinks considered high in sugar. So you've got your regular soda, which we all know regular soda contains lots of added sugar. Sweet tea, 100% juice, juice drinks, sports drinks, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, coffee with sugar, flavored milks. White milk would not be considered a sugar beverage, but when you add flavoring to it, like chocolate or strawberry, that's adding sugar to the drink. And then you have your energy drinks, which are not good for children to consume anyways, because they're not regulated very well as far as what is put in them. All right, so now we're going to talk about reading drink labels and what to look for. So if you're teaching families in your clinic about sugar beverages, how do you go about teaching them an easy way to learn? What is high and low? So first we want to look at the serving size. So you'll notice that the serving size is 8 ounces. Then we want to review how many servings are in the container. So it's got 2 servings in it. The entire bottle contains 16 ounces. Okay, because 8 plus 8 is 16. And then we want to notice that the numbers are per serving for 8 ounces. So amount per serving is 1 serving is 8 ounces. And something to notice, we don't talk about calories in Burn or Fit, but wouldn't you rather eat your calories than drink your calories? And I can be honest, I would definitely prefer to eat 6 Oreos over drinking whatever drink this was right here. Then we want to review the sugar. So look at the sugar or total sugar. And for every 4 grams, it's equal to 1 teaspoon of sugar. So if you notice here, there's 34 grams of total sugar in the drink. Okay? And we want to take that number and divide it by 4, and that's going to give us 17 teaspoons of sugar. So that's just 1 serving of this drink. So double that, and that makes a lot more teaspoons of sugar in this drink. And then lastly, to To choose more low-sugar beverages, look for drinks containing 3 grams of sugar or less per 8 ounces. So this is an 8-ounce serving size on the drink label, and so there's 34 grams of total sugar. So that's definitely a lot more than 3 grams of sugar. So that's considered a high sugar beverage. So what we always say is 3 grams of sugar or less is best. What about sports drinks? For our children, we tend to think that they are this active when they're playing sports, and when in reality, they're this active. So a lot of times with sports, children are sitting on the bench a lot. So having a sports drink really isn't needed. So this is our Gatorade bottle, and for one bottle, which is technically more than 8 ounces, it's going to have 34 grams of sugar in it. So it's a 20-ounce bottle, so it's definitely not going to be 3 grams or less. So it's going to have a significant amount of sugar in it. Even the G2 Gatorade wouldn't be considered a low sugar beverage. And you'll see that there's quite a few teaspoons of sugar. So it looks like about 8.5 teaspoons of sugar just in this one bottle of Gatorade. And something important to know about sports drinks is the reason why they were created in the first place. They were created for the Florida Gators football team, and they were practicing in really hot heat for long periods of time. So they needed that extra sugar and electrolytes to help fuel their body. So a good rule of thumb is that if the child is not active, or if the child is active for an hour or more, vigorously active for more than an hour at a time, then they might need some form of Gatorade or sports drinks to help, replenish what they've lost. But water is a great source of hydration for kids whenever they're playing sports. They definitely don't need all the added sugar from the sports drinks. What does the DOR say about drinks? Well, what it says is that the parent is in charge of how often the sugar-sweetened beverages are offered. It's really the parent who is the one who is buying the sugar beverages, so they can decide how often they're going to have those available in the home. Sugar-sweetened beverages, along with milk, regular or flavored, should only be consumed at meal and snack times. That's important. That's important to note. If children ask for a drink in between meals and snacks, they can have water or low sugar beverages. And what we notice in our clinic for a lot of our kids, they're either drinking lots of milk in between meals and snacks, or they're drinking, the sugar beverages. And so a lot of times if we just say, if we confine it to, well, let's only have milk or juice at meal and snack times, it really does cut down on the amount that they're drinking. And with milk, if a child is drinking milk all day long, well, milk has more than just sugar in it. It has protein in it. It has fat in it. So in a way, it's kind of a complete meal. So it fills their stomach up. And when they get to the meals or the snacks, they're not as hungry. So they fill their stomachs up a little bit, just enough, and it lowers a little bit, and then they fill it right back up with milk. So they never get to that sort of hungry, empty phase in their stomach. So another reason why it's so important to only have water and low sugar beverages in between meals. Here are some examples of some low sugar beverage options that we share with our families in Brenner Fit. You may be for low sugar beverage options and you may be against low sugar beverage options, and that's kind of your opinion. What we know is that there really has been no research to say that they are harmful for people to consume. Some certain types of sweeteners may give some people headaches or upset their stomachs. There has been stuff out there to say that even whenever you're switching to low sugar beverages like these, you may still gain weight. And what they've really found is that they're replacing that low sugar beverage by adding maybe a candy bar from the vending machine. So really, it's not changing much about their calorie intake because they're adding something else with it. Sometimes they say that they might make you crave more sugar. But what we really know for kids is our kids are looking for that flavor. And so if they're used to drinking juice or soda, these are great options as an in-between. Our end goal is for families to drink more water, but you kind of got to have a middle option for them. So this is why we talk about low sugar beverage options, because it can still give them the flavor that they're looking for, but not all the added sugar. And slowly they'll move to drinking more water. Everybody knows these days that water is important to drink. So, leave it up to your families as far as what change they want to make to it. If they want to try out some low sugar beverage options, then great. It's a-okay for them to do that. They might just choose to try to drink more water. It's really up to them. Let the family guide you with their interest in this. Here's our teaching tool for the balanced plate. So I was talking about this earlier, and this is a handout that we'll provide you, and you'll see that it has examples for the families as far as what foods fall into the different food groups, which can be helpful. And then on the bottom, it has why to use the balanced plate. So just like we talked about before, instead of counting calories and limiting portions, use the balanced plate to add variety to your meal. So the slide that we had earlier, it uses the exact same wording on this handout. This is what we use in our clinic for helping families create a balanced breakfast. So if they're already eating breakfast and they're wanting to figure out how to make a breakfast more filling, this is when we talk about having at least 3 food groups in a meal. So it's obviously not all the ideas out there, but it gives them some ideas as far as what breakfast items for protein and your grains, your starches, and your fruits and vegetables. It gives them balanced breakfast ideas on the bottom, just if they're looking for some new ideas. And then on the right hand side, it's great because they can write down some of their ideas. So you could do this with them in clinic if you wanted to, or you can give it to the family and they can do it together whenever they go home. And then this is the same for the balanced lunch, so they would use it in the same way. In the same way for dinner. So up top, it always explains why we start talking about the balanced plate for 3 or 4 food groups. And then this one is for snacks. So the same type of concept. It gives them ideas, it gives them ways to put snacks together, and then they can plan it. So how to help a family get started. Ask the family where they would like to start. Always get their ideas, and then offer your suggestions. So suggestions to the what could be adding a food group to snack or dinner, or thinking about drinking water or low sugar beverages only between meals, or the parent offering new fruit or vegetable without the pressure to try. So questions, if you have any questions about today's presentation, I would love for you guys to discuss those. And then just give us an email and we'll respond back to your questions. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation on the what of feeding.